Hi, my name is Mary Beth Stephen, and I was using word inquiry in my classroom for 9 years. I was teaching 10 and 11-year-olds, so it was grade 5, and we often used a matrix. I'm offering this class because I think there's a lot of creative ways to use it. And I see a lot of people thinking that a very logical thing to do is to write word sums based on a word matrix. But I wanted to not only give you more information about a matrix, but perhaps get your imagination going in what creative ways you could use it for your students as well. So here it is. It's called The Matrix, Pregnant with Possibilities. And I hope you're very curious about why I've used that wording. So let's get started. All right, the matrix, pregnant with possibilities. I would like to start off by talking about the word matrix. What can we know about it, understand better about it? If we look at Edam Online, this is the entry that we'll see. Matrix, a noun. It was first attested in the late 14th century. Now, I want to stop and talk a little bit about this entry, just in case you're not familiar with Edam Online or haven't read that many entries. You're thinking about having your students use Edam Online, but you're not really sure about what the entry tells you. So I'm just going to point out a few things. All right, this first information here, this date, that's the date of attestation. That means that there's an actual document from the late 14th century in which this word is written. So we know it existed at that time. It was either spelled M-A-T-R-I-S or M-A-T-R-I-C-E at that time. And look at this, it was used to mean uterus or womb. Imagine that. Now, prior to late 14th century, and that's what this word from indicates, that we're taking a step further back in time, it is from Old French, and it was spelled M-A-T-R-I-C-E, also used to mean womb or uterus. And directly from Latin, M-A-T-R-I-X. The genitive spelling was M-A-T-R-I-C-I-S. And look at that spelling in Latin. It's exactly the same spelling we have today. In Latin, it was used to mean pregnant animal. In late Latin, used to mean womb, also source or origin. Here we have another word, from. Again, a step further back in time, but we're still in Latin. M-A-T-E-R, genitive M-A-T-R-I-S, with a meaning of mother. How about that? Think about it. A matrix. If you've seen a matrix, used a word matrix, you can think about it being pregnant with possibilities, that it's like a womb, like taking care of all those morphemes and the possibility that they will be put together in such a way to create a group of words. Just kind of a neat way, a really neat way to think about a matrix. Now, there's one other thing I wanted to point out in this entry, and that's right here. It says, see mother, and mother is bolded. When you're reading an entry at Edam Online and you see something like this, I encourage you to go there. It may be that the whole story of this word hasn't been told yet, but you will get the rest of the details at the link. It may be it is told, but still there's going to be something there worth your while looking at. So if we do follow this, this is what else we find at Edam Online. The sense of that which has given birth to anything is from late Old English as a familiar term of address to an elderly woman, especially of the lower class, by circa 1200. So what we find there are two other uses of that word from times in history. So interesting. But I think we can find out in this first entry that the furthest back relative, or I should say Root is mater in Latin, where this word derives from. Now, how would I take this information that we're reading in this entry and help my students write it out in their notebooks in a way that might help them make more sense of it? Let me show you how I would do it using this word as a model, since we're just looking at it and reading this entry. I would have them write the word at the top of the page. Now, sometimes I'll do this on the board and have them copy into their notebook just so they have a model of how to do it for themselves. So we have the word matrix, and we know that it's first attested, 14th century, has two different spellings, used to mean a womb or that which gives origin to something. All right, we see that in the entry here. Now, when we come to this first from, I'm going to have them draw a down arrow. It's from Old French, matrice, having a sense of womb or uterus. Okay, as we're going along in this entry, we come to another from. Latin, matrix, pregnant animal, also source or origin. Okay, and what do? We come to another from, so it's another down arrow. And the information there, that is from Latin, mater, mother. So if they write it like this, it's kind of like a timeline, isn't it? They can kind of follow it down to the furthest back ancestor. Where does matrix come from, right? It comes from Latin, mater, mater, I think, mother. All right, so again, I've described a matrix as something that is pregnant with possibilities. Let's take a closer look at that word, pregnant. Now, have you ever thought about the word sum for pregnant? Here it is. Now, when you write a word sum, all of a sudden the PRE, you're kind of probably going, oh, I know that prefix, right? I think I did too, but I think when I looked at it within this word, I didn't know what to do with the rest of it, so I kind of leave it all together, right? Well, this is the word sum. GN is a bound base with a denotation of be born. And PRE is kind of has the expected sense of before. So pregnant, it's that time before being born. Makes sense, doesn't it? Yeah. But how do I know GN is the base? How do I know that? Well, if I look at Edam Online, it's such a great site. I encourage you to go there. Edam Online, I find that this GN is from this word, GNATUS, which is the past participle of this word, GNASCI. And GNASCI is an older form of NASCI, to be born. So newer form, older form. But still, how am I able to pull the GN off of these two forms? Okay, there is a class that I took called Latin for Orthographers. So learning a bit about Latin verbs. And this is the past participle form in Latin. I know from that class that the US is a Latin suffix that can be removed, a past participle suffix, and that the AT is a stem suffix, or was in Latin, and can be removed. That leaves me with GN as the bound base. I'm calling it a bound base because we don't ever see it as a base on its own. It is always fixed to either a prefix or a suffix. And in the word pregnant, it has both a prefix and a suffix attached to it, right? So if this is the older form, right? Because look at this spelling here. What's the difference? The only difference in spelling is the G. The newer form is NASCI. So does that mean the N by itself is a base? Well, yes, it is. It's another bound base, uniliteral, one letter base from NATUS. And just as I did with this past participle form of this Latin verb, I can do the same thing here. I can remove the US past participle suffix, the AT stem suffix, and I'm left with N as my single letter base. And again, it brings a sense of to be born. So where have I seen this N? Certainly not every N I come across is this N, right? This bound base. Let's look at a few words where you might see the connection and recognize that, yes, this could be. Look at neonate, having a sense of newly born, the N-E-O having that sense of new, right? And look at what's at the end, an ATE suffix, very common suffix. That same ATE suffix is here in native. The N base, ATE, the E's been replaced with a vowel suffix, IVE. That same ATE suffix is here in nation. N is the base, ATE suffix. The E has been replaced with an ION suffix. The same ATE suffix is here too. N plus ATE, replace the E with URE suffix, another vowel suffix. And it's also here in prenatal. PRE is the prefix, N is the bound base, ATE, replace that E with the vowel suffix AL. Here we see that ATE suffix at the end in innate, right? So prefix IN, base N, ATE suffix. Interesting, isn't it? And you can feel the sense that this N is a base. It's not just a letter, it's a base carrying meaning, having something to do with born, being born. If something is innate, it exists within you from the time you were born. If it's your nature to do something, it's part of who you are. Again, it's something that has been with you since you were born. Fascinating. All right, now there's one more word I'd like to turn your attention to, and that has this GN, the older form of this same Latin verb, and that is the word cognate. If you're going to do work with Edam Online, you are probably going to run into this word. And here it has that same bound base, be born. And here it has the prefix CO, which is an assimilated form of COM, which has a sense in this word of together. So when two things are cognate, you could say that they're born together or they're existing together. Now, this entry here, again, is from Edam Online. And it says if you're talking about things, two things being cognate, it just means they're related in origin. They're traceable to the same source. And that definition has been around since 1640s. If you're talking specifically about words that are cognate, that means they're coming from the same root or original word, but they're showing differences due to subsequent separate phonetic development. And that has been in place since 1782. If you're talking about languages that are cognate, that means they're from the same original language. And that use has been in place since 1799. An example of cognate languages would be French, Spanish, and Italian. They all essentially descended from Latin, but they're not cognate with Latin because Latin existed first, right? And they are descended from Latin. An example of words that are cognate: English cognate, Spanish, I think it would be cognato, Italian cognato, are cognate words from Latin cognatus. Here's another example: English brother, Sanskrit, I don't know how to pronounce that, BHRTR. I always tell my students, if you're reading at Edam Online and you're not sure about a pronunciation, spell it. It's okay. Greek, PHRATR, Latin, frater, Russian, brat, perhaps. They are all cognate words, means they're all existing, and they're in different languages, and they all descend from the Proto-Indo-European root. And this is what that is. Now, you're seeing this asterisk here, right? Well, that tells you that this is not an attested spelling. So we're not positive about that. That's not hard evidence. It's a best guess by experts, people who really study languages. And this is what they think where it's from, right? So yes, it's thought of that they're from this Proto-Indo-European root. But again, not attested, no hard evidence. We don't have anything in writing to prove it. One other thing about this, words that are cognates are more like cousins than siblings. So think of it in that way, more like cousins. They develop in different languages. All right, well, let's move on and talk about the matrix itself. So I've got a skeleton of one, and I've put some color-coded cubes in there so we could just talk about where can we expect to find things in a matrix. This big blue box in the middle is where we would expect to see our featured base. What is this matrix about, right? What base are we building things on? And below it is the denotation. Now, I like to use quotation marks. I'm pretty consistent with that in class, on the board, in our notebooks. If we put quotation marks around it, we know we're talking about what its meaning is, its sense and meaning. So I tend to use that even in a matrix. I don't think it has to be, but like I said, it's something I do consistently in my practice. Okay, so the featured base is front and center, right? But look, there's blue boxes in every cell on this matrix. All that means is it's possible for a base to be in any of these cells because it could form a compound word, right? It could. So we might take this blue, might put another base here, add it to this one, and be able to create a compound word. Or down here, this base and this base could form a compound word. Now, it is possible that we can join more than two bases to create compound words. So it is possible. Just because I have blue boxes in every cell, it doesn't mean there will be a base in every cell. It's just that it's possible for a base to be in any of these cells. Now, there's something here, this one, which is representing a connecting vowel, that kind of brownish tan color, the connecting vowel. A connecting vowel is something that connects two bases. It connects two things, is what I should start with. It connects two things. So in this particular situation, it could be connecting this base in this cell to the featured base. Let's look at an example. Let's think about the word autograph. So over in this cell, we could have the base AUT. This connecting vowel could be the O, and the featured base could be GRAPH. But what if I wanted AUT to be my featured base? Well, then it would be here, and I would be looking over here for a place where a connecting vowel could be. I could see one right here in the middle here, and my other base, GRAPH, would have to be over in this cell. Okay, so that's one way I might use a connecting vowel to help me create a compound word, right? Another way I might use a connecting vowel is to connect a base to a suffix. So in the word racial, my featured base is RACE. My connecting vowel is I, so maybe it's way up here. And then I have a suffix following that. So that would be in the green box, the AL suffix. So yeah, a connecting vowel can connect two bases. It can connect a base to a suffix. And there's one more way we can use one to connect two suffixes. So here's the word voracious. VORE, you might recognize it from words like carnivore and omnivore, detritivore. It has to do with devouring, eating. And that would be our bound base. So that's going to be our featured base in this word. Then I have a suffix, connecting vowel, and suffix. So I'd need a place like down here. So I would have VORE as my featured base, ACE as my first suffix, an I connecting vowel, and my second suffix, OUS. And I would be able to put it that way in a matrix, right? The one place we're not going to see a connecting vowel is to connect a prefix to a base. That's not going to happen. So if this was a connecting vowel, this would have to be a base in this first cell. If I didn't have that situation going on, yeah, I could have prefix in both of these cells. I could have a prefix in any of these cells that are on the left of the featured base. And yes, a word can have two prefixes. A word can have more than two prefixes, okay? But this is showing the possibilities of what we could expect to find in some of these cells. And you'll notice that the green squares, the suffixes, are also popping up in every cell to the right of the featured base, because it's possible for those all to be suffix, filled with a suffix. That could happen. One thing you're going to notice about those connecting vowels, though, they're never in an outer cell. They're always in that inner one, because remember, their job is to be connecting two things, right? Base to a base to a suffix, or a suffix to another suffix. So they're in those inner cells, no matter if they're on the left of the base or the right of the base. All right, let's move on and look at a real live matrix full of morphemes. And here we have a matrix for that with a featured base of FINE, having a denotation of boundary or limit. Now you'll see that I did a word sum at the top and I kind of stretched it out. Well, there's a point for that. The reason I did that is I want to illustrate that these vertical lines in a matrix are where the plus signs would go in a word sum. So this word sum here, IN plus DE plus FINE plus ITE down at the bottom plus LY. There's the word sum for indefinitely. And again, those vertical lines are where we would expect to see a plus sign. And I think that's very helpful to your students, because you don't want students, you don't want them leaping over any cells. This is very orderly. It moves in one direction and we don't skip over cells. So we wouldn't go IN right to the FINE. We have to do this plus sign. We have to include both of these before we can get to the FINE. Something else I wanted to point out on this matrix, it's a question my students have had, and that is, why is ISH and ED, why do they get their own cell? But ED, ING, and S are sharing one. Why is that? And that's a really great question, isn't it? Well, okay, if I start with FINE base and I add ISH, I will form the word finish, right? This matrix offers me the opportunity to add another suffix, an ED. So I could have FINE plus ISH plus ED, and I would end up with the word finished. Now, let's move up to this where they're sharing. I could have my base FINE plus ED, and I would form the word find. This matrix doesn't give me the option of adding another suffix after that. I could have FINE plus ING, and I would have the word finding. But I don't have the option to add another suffix behind there. Are you getting the picture? These are all, can go directly onto the end of the base, but it ends there. The story ends there. This matrix doesn't offer us that opportunity. It does offer us that opportunity after the ISH to also add an ED. It does offer us the opportunity to add an LY after we've added an AL. So final, finally, right? Down here, I could have FINE plus ITE. Now I have two choices. I can add either the ION or the LY, right? So definite, definition, definitely. I have those options. And here's another matrix full of great things. We have two prefixes, and then we have the base MODE with a denotation of measure or manner. Now, I don't have to add both of these prefixes. I could add just the COM and form the word commode, but I could have both of them with the AC plus COM plus MODE plus ATE, I form the word accommodate. And of course, I could keep going. Accommodation, accommodations, right? Accommodating, accommodates. I have that option. I could start just with MODE, add a EST, and get the word modest. Here I have a connecting vowel, as I was showing you before, right? It's in one of those inner cells close to the base. What I'm doing here is forming compound words. MODE plus I plus FICE plus ATE plus ION plus S would be modifications, right? Or if I went the other way to the other base, FY, I could have modify or modifier. Now, I bet you know that if I did form the word modifier, I wouldn't be having a Y. I wouldn't be spelling it with a Y, would I? I would have toggled that Y to I. Well, this is another great point. If there's suffixing conventions that are going to happen as these pieces are put together, they're not going to happen on a matrix. A matrix gives us the full form of the morpheme. Any suffixing conventions happen in a word sum. So we write the word sum, and that's when we go back to consider if anything needs to be changed in the spelling with that particular combination of morphemes. So how do I introduce this idea of a matrix to my students? Well, on the first day of school, I have started with this right on the first day of school. I want to focus on showing them that words have this structure, that we can think of them as parts that come together to create a fully spelled word. So for that end, I will sometimes pick a base, some like HELP, and I will pick that because they know it. That's the biggest reason. They know it. They've been using this word for a long time. I don't want them to think I'm testing them in any way with an unfamiliar word or a word that's bigger and they don't really know what the parts are. Here, I'm pretty sure they know what the parts are, right? So if I say help is a word, can you think of other things we can do it, other forms? Can we add suffixes or prefixes to it? And when I put it that way, the students will, oh yeah, helping, helped, helper, helpers, unhelpful, right? They have lots to offer me. And so we end up with a nice list like this. Now it's ready to show them how we could take this list of words, organize it into a matrix. And you'll notice that I'm hand drawing a matrix when I'm introducing it. So I wrote the base right here, HELP, in that place where the featured base would go, or the featured base. And then I'm saying the word out loud, helping. So it's HELP plus what? And the students say ing. Okay, great. I'm going to write ing over here because I've drawn my vertical line separating out the base from the prefix side and the suffix side. So I'm writing ing where suffixes would be listed. Okay. Second word, HELP plus what? ED. Okay, I'm going to put that right below ing. HELP plus what? ER. Right, exactly. I'm going to put that right here. At this point, I haven't put this line that you see separating the ED and the ing from the ER. Haven't done it. Next word, HELP plus what? See, right here, somebody's going to say ERS as if that's a suffix. But it's two suffixes, and that's what I want to point out. So I will say, well, I think we've got an ER, and what have we done to it? What have we done to the word helper? We've only made it be more than one, right? We've added an S suffix. And I want this S to follow the ER. So I am going to create those cells. So there's some direction on which order to put them in, right? In which order to use those morphemes, to add them together. Then we have unhelpful. All right, we've got a prefix, so it goes over in the prefix column. And we're adding an FUL suffix. I don't think in this moment we had created on our helpfully or helpfulness, but I think I might have added that at the end of this discussion. Then I have an S. Is this the same S as the one we already put on this matrix? Well, it's an S suffix. It's just that the one up here comes behind the ER. This one down here comes right behind the base. So I need to list it to show that it can come right behind the base. Everything in this first column can come right behind the base, right? Now, then we fill in the rest of the matrix, right? So I'm having this opportunity to talk about how we're structuring this and how it represents our whole list of words. When I have this completed, I'm sure that why I have this word sum is that I was looking at this word helpfully and wanted to make sure my students understood that the second part is not the free base FULL plus a Y suffix, that FULL is a free base, FUL is the suffix plus an LY, right? So I just wanted them to know that. Now, the next thing is to talk about writing the word sums. So in the last example, we kind of did that out loud as we went through and I was filling in the matrix. But now next, it's that opportunity to sit down and write them out. So say my base is HOPE, and I'm writing these word sums. The first one, I would read it like this. HOPE plus S is rewritten as, check the joins. So we go back. This is a single final non-syllabic E, but this is a consonant suffix, no change. Okay, is rewritten as HOPE-S. Slight pause between HOPE and S. I want my students to become aware that those are two morphemes, and that slight pause does that. All right, next word sum. HOPE plus ING. Notice I'm saying ING as kind of a unit, ING, is rewritten as, go back and check the joins. We have a single final non-syllabic E. We're joining it to, a vowel suffix. So we will indeed replace this E. So I'm putting the line through it to show it will be replaced with this vowel suffix. All right, is rewritten as HOP, replace the E, ING. Notice I said it out loud. Replace the E. Again, I want my students to visualize what they're doing. They know that this is not the base HOP, this is the base HOPE. I want them to be aware. What happened to the E? We replaced it. If we remove the ING, we would see it again, right? All right, so we go through and we practice writing and reading word sums. Here's another one, and you'll notice at this point, I'm still drawing some of these these matrices until we get really familiar with them, right? And again, I can talk about how they're structured as we go. So let's look at the base HAP. How do we form the word happy? Well, look at the word sum. HAP plus Y is rewritten as, check the joins. Okay, we have, this is one syllabic beat, HAP. We have one final consonant and a single vowel in front of that. We're adding a vowel suffix. That means this P is going to be doubled. So, all right, is rewritten as HA double the P, Y. And that could be the way it is spoken, read by my students. Here, PER plus HAP plus S is rewritten as, check the joins, nothing between the prefix and the base. Here we're adding a consonant suffix, so no change, is rewritten as PER, HAP, S. There's that slight pause between morphemes again, right? Now, what happens when we want to write a word like happier? How are we going to show what's going on there? How are we going to show the structure? First, I want my students to know that we're starting with the word happy. So this is really what's going on, right? The HAP, if I'm looking at my matrix, HAP plus Y plus ER, right? That's my word sum. But what's going on with the suffixing convention when we do that? Well, one way you can do this is to do a two-step word sum. So first, let's join these two. HAP plus Y is rewritten as, check the joins, up, one consonant, single vowel in front of that, adding a vowel suffix. We're going to be doubling that P. Okay, is rewritten as HA double the P, Y. Now we can add the ER. So HAPPY plus ER is rewritten as, check the joins. Okay, we have a consonant in front of the final Y. We are going to be toggling the Y to I before we add the suffix. All right, is rewritten as HA double the P, toggle Y to I, ER. And that's what's happening. We have two suffixing conventions going on here, right? Two different ones. Now that's one possibility. The other one is to do it all in one. I tend to like to do the two-step when I'm introducing word sums to my students, but I definitely want them to be able to understand what's happening here. So often they know this is the spelling, but they don't know why. They don't know what happened to the Y, or the, Y changed to an I. If I'm showing them this with one word, I like to pull in another word as well. I want to show them how consistent this is, right? But here, we're not doubling. Here, the first suffixing convention was replace the single final non-syllabic E with a vowel suffix. And then we had to, when we added the next suffix, toggle the Y to I. So how to make a matrix online? I'd like to walk through how I would go about this. And I'd like to use I would like to use this STUDENT as the word I'm considering. So what is the word sum hypothesis? What is my idea of what the structure of this is? If I look at this word in isolation, I might think, well, it's a free base. So what I like to do is I like to think of a couple other words that might share some of the spelling and definitely share some idea of meaning. Student, study, studying, studied. From that list, I can look at these and go, they all have STUD. Okay, what happens after that? Well, this one has an ENT suffix. This one has a Y suffix. This one has a Y suffix and an ING suffix. This one had the Y toggle to I and an ED suffix. Okay, so something different is happening, especially between this first one and the second one. Something different is happening. So that leads me to believe that my base might be STUD. Now, when I go to write it out in my word sum, I'm going to add the single final non-syllabic E. And I'm telling you right now, I added it. It's not there in the Latin infinitive form. That has an ERE. That ERE is removable. It is an infinitive suffix in Latin. And as it came into modern English, I would put an E there. And I'll tell you why. Because look at this word student. I'm adding a vowel suffix, ENT. I have a base with a single final consonant and a single vowel in front of it. What should be happening? This D should double, shouldn't it? But it doesn't. What's one way to prevent that doubling? An E on the base. We never see STUDE because it's never final in a word. It's always initial in a word, or in the list I found anyway. But I still think it needs to be there. This is what I tell my students because they might not understand this base in particular. But think about the two words HOPE and HOP. Now, I'm not talking about think about their meaning, but think about the structure of those two. HOP, and we add a vowel suffix, we know what happens. That P gets doubled, right? It gets doubled. Writing a vowel suffix, we have a single consonant with a single vowel in front of it. We double that final consonant. But look at the word hope, HOPE. We never double that P. Why not? Because what happens is the vowel suffix replaces the E. The E is there to prevent the doubling. It's kind of the first step. It hits the E before it can get to the P. So that's what happens. The E is preventing the P from being doubled in HOPE. And the same thing, in my opinion, the same thing is happening here. Okay, just wanted you to understand why I put that E there. Next, I encourage you to go to Word Searcher, see if you can expand your list. If you Google for Word Searcher, make sure you're looking to see that Neil Ramsden's name is connected with it. Then you know you're at the right site, because he created that. So I went there, and I have a much longer list now, don't I? Yeah, a number of words that share the same base. One way I might represent this, besides a matrix, or in addition to a matrix, would be a word web. Here I've created one. I have my base, featured base in the middle. I have my denotation beneath it. And then what I've done is I've kind of grouped these words in ways that made sense to me. And you know that if you ask students to group them, they might have different ideas of what made sense to them, and that's fine. Just ask them what their reasoning was. Listen to them, let them think about why they're grouping them a certain way. So yeah, what I like about doing this is we can focus on meaning. I like to take a moment and say, okay, study. What does that have to do with be diligent? What does students or student have to do with being diligent? What about an understudy? What is an understudy? Does everybody know what an understudy is, right? I get to clear that up. Or studio. What do you do in a studio? And why might a studio have something to do with being diligent? So again, we're bringing all of the words we collected, all of these words that share the space, back to the denotation of that base and making sure we understand the connection. Okay, so if you're going to go to Mini Matrix Maker, perhaps you want to do that next, then I recommend you sit down and write out the word sums before you get there. It'll just save some time to not have to be there and thinking about, oh, what's the word sum? So just write them out here. You'll be able to teach your students easy enough to get lots of experience doing this, but there is going to be that time they come to you and they say, hey, I'm stuck. I'm stuck on studious. I don't understand why it's a Y and not an I, right? And I'll tell you, there may be times when you look at it and you go, wow, I'm stuck too. And that's okay. That is okay. So it's a moment for you to sit down with your student and say, let's see what we can come up together. So what were you thinking about it? And here's what I'm thinking, right? Show them what to do when they're stuck by demonstrating, right? And show them, even if you can't come up with it with your student in the moment, make sense of it. I know who to ask. I know where to go. I know a great book we can look at. We could look at them online, see if it's very helpful. Might be, might not be. Where else can we look, right? So you have that grand opportunity to model what we do when we're stuck, because that's going to help them moving forward. All right. So now we're ready to go to Mini Matrix Maker. You have all those word sums written out. Again, if you Google Mini Matrix Maker, make sure that it's connected with Neil Ramsden, because this is his creation, and you're going to know you're at the right place. Right here is the link where you're going to click next from this home page. When you click on that link, this is the page you come to, the edit page. The first thing you're going to do is fill in the area with working base. So it's spelled S-T-U-D-E. You notice how I've capitalized the first letter? That's what it says to do here. Initial capital. Second thing, fill in the denotation. So here I have done that. And remember I said that I put in quotation marks. I don't know if everybody does. I tend to do that. 3, type in those word sums, right? If you've got them all written out and ready to go, this doesn't take as long at all to do. One thing I will point out, since I capitalized it up here, the base, S-T-U-D-E, my working base, I don't need to capitalize it down here. But I do need to capitalize any other bases that are in my word sums. And I have the base, U-N-D-E-R, so I need to capitalize that base. What'll happen is it'll come out bold on your matrix, okay? So let's say I've got these all typed in, I'm feeling good, I'm ready to hit that update button. Woohoo! And then this happens. Now, I want you to see this so that you can say, oh, no biggie, I know what to do. There was one error, one sum was affected. I go back up and I see the one that was affected. Oh, I see what I did. I didn't have this working base, S-T-U-D-E. I had S-T-U-D-Y. So all I need to do is backspace, get rid of the asterisk. I need to rewrite that word sum to be S-T-U-D-E plus Y plus O-U-S plus L-Y. Okay, got it fixed. Then you go and hit update again. This time, all right, it worked. We have a matrix. Now, one thing I want to point out here is that then the next thing I have my students do is to look it over. You know, every once in a while, now all of a sudden you see something you didn't notice before. Oh, wait, I put O-U-S plus L-Y as one suffix, and I really know that those are 2. So all you do is you go to this matrix edit, just takes you back one page. You fix that up, and then you hit update again, and you're back to this page. You don't have to start over. You just go back and, make your correction. The other thing I want to show you is that there is a print button, but there is no save button. This is something you would want your students to do when you had at least 15 minutes left of class. You do it, and they're going to have to start over if they don't get it done, and they're leaving for the day or whatever. So it's a good idea to allow yourself enough time to do it. But if those word sums are written ahead of time, this really doesn't take very long. And if it's their 3rd or 4th, it takes even less time. They know what they're doing. They feel really confident. They catch on to doing this rather quickly. I love the fact that not only is the matrix here, but the list of word sums is here as well. I have caught myself wondering, how many words did I put in when I made this? Because all of a sudden you're like, how many words can I make on here? It reminds you what you put in and how many words that you felt could be represented on this matrix. Yeah, it's a nice thought. All right, so here's our matrix that I just created. And I want to remind you that this is my matrix. I'm the one who put it together. A matrix is just that. It is one person's understanding at a given moment in time. So when I created this, it represents what I understood to be true at that time. Right now, I am questioning IO as a suffix. It has, it's just something that's been on my mind for a little bit now. I don't feel confident enough that I have enough evidence to write it differently. So I'm leaving it for now. But I think that it's quite possible that the I is a connecting vowel and the O is the suffix. I just don't have enough evidence that I feel comfortable changing it yet, right? Now, I think this is a wonderful thing to share with your students. You say, you know what, I'm just not sure about that. what you're doing when you do that is you're giving them permission to also be thinking about things and to be like, well, you know what? I have a theory. I have an idea. I think I need more evidence, though. That's the kind of thinking we want from them. And they need to see us model it as well. Here is one more way to represent all of this information we collected. We have our matrix. We have the Latin root studere, from our meaning be diligent. We also have this word up here, etude. Now, this word also comes from Latin studere. It does, but it doesn't share spelling with stude, does it? It couldn't be on this matrix. These two are etymological relatives, right? They come from the same source word. They come from the same root, but they don't share spelling. They belong inside the circle, though, because of their relationship. And what's on the outside of the circle? Some words or synonyms, words that we might use if we're thinking about the bigger picture of this word student. So think about it that way. We started with student. We branched out to this bigger collection of words related to student. And then we branched out to its etymological relative. And now we're branching out even further to words that are just related by meaning. They have a kind of a meaning connection, but not a root connection or a spelling connection. Kind of a neat way to think about it, looking at that bigger picture again. Okay, what are some advantages of making your own matrix so you can work with children? Because I know there are matrices available in certain places, but I think there's advantages when you make your own. Number one, you can control the focus of the matrix. What if you just want to show your students that words have structure? You don't really want to start off with any of the suffixing conventions being applied. You can do that. You can choose a word, a base, like I did with HELP. You can do that. I didn't have to add any suffixing conventions. So it was a perfect word for me to start with because my focus was on structure, right? But then say you do want to focus on one of the suffixing conventions. Well, choose a base where sometimes the E is replaced and sometimes it's not. Or the Y sometimes toggles with an I and sometimes it doesn't. Or the final consonant of the base doubles sometimes and sometimes it doesn't, right? You get to choose that. You can choose the number of suffixes. When you're using someone else's matrix, you may be going, well, kids, let's not look at that one, or let's ignore that one, or gee, I really didn't, I just wanted to really solidify their understanding of these 4 suffixes first, right? You do that when you're making your own. You don't have to add every possibility of a word sum in your matrix that you're creating, right? And maybe there's particular affixes that you do want to focus on. Like I might want to introduce connecting vowels and show my students how they would be represented on a matrix. I can do that. I can pick a word that I know will need a connecting vowel to make some compound words, right? The other thing you can control is the size of your matrix. If you're just beginning, if you have younger students, if you have students that are super new to the idea of a matrix, make a small one, just a couple suffixes, maybe a prefix, and you're good to go. But maybe you have those students that are on fire about this and have made a couple and want to see what it looks like if you make a super big matrix, right? You have the control here, and that's what's so wonderful about it. I think personally, one of the biggest advantages of making your own is that you have some struggles along the way. You might run into a word where you're not sure about the word sum. Well, when you're going through those struggles, you become a better guide when teaching your own students how to make their own matrices. It's kind of like, Oh, I getcha. I got stuck yesterday trying to figure out a word sum, and I went and talked to so and so, or I thought about it for a long time, or I collected a couple words, and then I could see what was really going on, right? Your experience is going to be very valuable when you're teaching children to use these resources. So what are the advantages of having children make their own matrix? Well, the students are writing word sums over and over and over again. They become very familiar with affixes that way, right? Because they're using them over and over and over. They're applying the knowledge they have about some of the morphemes and that structure and knowledge of suffixing conventions, right? They're applying them over and over with a word sum. And that's really great. And it reinforces the spelling of some of the morphemes too. Students control how many words from the family to include. Very rarely have I had students that really just wanted to make the smallest matrix they could. More often, they're excited to see a bigger one. So I might say that 15 words on a matrix to, well, anywhere upwards of 30 they get excited about. That's usually the range. But like I said, I'm working with 10, 11-year-olds, and we've made several of the matrices. And for students, that moment when you hit update is a thrill. I have literally heard kids going, when they see that matrix, that they put in all the word sums and it's theirs, and they feel like they've created this thing that is so pregnant with possibilities. Okay, to end this class, I would like to introduce a couple of activities that involve using a matrix and explain how you would go about that. You're probably aware of writing word sums based on a matrix, okay? There's also these other ideas. Have students to move cards to create a matrix. So putting the morphemes on smaller cards. Give students a list of words and an empty matrix and see if they can fill it in. Let students teach younger students about using a matrix. And number 5, place matrices in unexpected places as a thing of beauty and intrigue. So let's start with number 1. Write word sums based on a matrix. Well, this is a matrix that I created one time. You can see it's fairly large. I needed to be absent from school, and I wanted the students to work in twos to write word sums. Now, one thing I wanted to show you about this matrix, this really illustrates a point I made earlier. At this moment in time, when I created this matrix, I thought that LOCO was a base. I didn't understand at that time that this O is really a connecting vowel. It wasn't until I had really focused on this base and looked up some, or found some related words like local and locus, that I realized that the base would be LOC potential E. This is how I would create the same matrix now that my understanding has deepened. You see how it's, instead of being in the upper left-hand corner, it's down in the lower left-hand corner. And it shares a cell with AUT because they both share the connecting vowel O in order to form words like locomotive or automotive, right? But I thought it would be important to share this, when you know more, you redo it, you make a new matrix, and you share your new understanding. These are the directions I gave my students for this particular assignment, right? Here's a matrix for the bound base, MOTE. You notice how these are angle brackets? That means we spell it out. We don't pronounce it. Remember that we call this kind of a base a bound base because it isn't a word by itself. It is always bound to another element, a suffix or a prefix or another base. I'd like to see how many words you and your partner can recognize and write word sums for. Make sure your word sum looks like the example below. 1, make your list on lined paper, put both your name and your partner's name on top, skip every other line, take turns writing the word sums, write neatly so I can read it easily. Once you are finished, read through your list together. Make sure you could use each word in a sentence. If you aren't sure what the word has to do with move, look the word up in a dictionary and then turn it in. So those were my directions for this assignment. And here is a student work example of what I got back. And one thing I wanted to point out is that when the students write and they tend not to leave enough space, these plus signs can sometimes look like the letter T. Are you noticing that? Here's one in particular, AUT plus. Yeah, that plus sign and that T, they look really close. What I've gone to doing is having them put a circle around the plus sign, and that makes it easier for all of us to understand, you know, are we looking at a letter? Are we looking at a symbol? But another reason to highlight this particular word is that the person saw nope, didn't recognize the word automotive. So I thought it must be automobile. They were familiar with that word. And it's so interesting. Not only did they cross off the single final non-syllabic E, which happens sometimes, but they crossed off a T and then added B-I-L-E. They kind of forced this one, didn't they? We don't find B-I-L-E on this matrix at all. So what I did the next day when I was back is I wrote the word automobile on the board. And because I'm not a person who likes to call anybody out on something like that, don't need to embarrass anybody, I said, you know, a couple people had this on their list. And isn't that interesting? What is the word sum for automobile? Let's see if we can parse this out. And we did, and we found out that, oh, there's no MOTE base in this particular word. That's a different base, but it is interesting, right? And an automobile and automotive do have something in common. There is definitely a sense of a meaning shared there. Another thing I wanted to point out is the word right below here. So the student saw on the matrix MOTE plus OR plus BIKE, motorbike. Then went over here thinking in their head, I know how to spell motorbike, MOTE plus R plus BIKE, motorbike, thinking that not an OR but an ER for motor. And there is no R suffix again on the matrix. And that's going to happen. You're going to have students that kind of skip over using the matrix because they, you know, thinking they already know the spelling of that. So it's a great thing to go back and be aware of. Another thing I would like to point out with a matrix like this, students are, you know, going along, making words. What if they do this, MOTE plus LY, motely? Structurally, those two could go together, right? But what does it mean? So if I see that happening, I'll ask a student, can you use that in a sentence, motely? And that's usually where it stops, because usually they're like, huh. So, well, why don't you go look it up in the dictionary? And if it's there, that's fabulous, because you and I have just both learned a word we weren't sure about. If it's not there, let's leave it off and just keep searching for the words that we are familiar with, right? It's a great way to handle that. I don't like to say that's not a word, because how do I know? I haven't seen every word in the universe. I haven't looked at every resource. It could be it was a word at one time and just went out of use. I really am not sure, right? But I do know that we should be able to understand what it means if it is a word. That's in use now. Okay, number 2, have students move morphemes on a matrix to create word sums. So here, I have the working base, LOVE, on a card, right? I have these suffixes on different cards, And I've also color coded them. So the suffixes are in red and the base is in black. This like double pipe cleaner here, that's my vertical line of my matrix. Now, the student I'm working with in this video is 5 years old, not a reader, pre-reader, has little experience, but is learning, just finished 4K, so has knowledge of letters, and sometimes it can do some like recognition of what the phoneme would be when they're looking at the grapheme, sometimes, certainly not all of them. Now, the reason I chose this word love is because I know the student knows this word. I know it. I know it because the student in question is my granddaughter. 5 years old, knows this word, because how many times has she drawn a picture and want to give it to somebody and wanted to write the word love on the bottom and sign her name. So she's known this word for a while, and I thought it was a perfect word to work with. Okay, so today we're starting with a word that I know you know, this base. What is that? Can you spell it out for me, this base?
Love.
And spell it out?
L-O-V-E spells love.
Okay. Now, what would happen if we added one of the suffixes that you see printed in red? Pick one. Okay, now spell everything out.
L-O-V-E-S.
And what does that spell?
Loves.
Can you use that in a sentence?
Like, June loves her nana.
Oh, I like that sentence. Okay, now let's take the S off. Can you find another suffix you might want to try? ED for loved.
Okay.
And you're going to have to cover up the E when you join them.
Okay, so. Okay. L-O-V-E plus. No.
Yes, no, that's right. You were right.
L-O-V-E-D spells love.
Actually, it's like this. L-O-V-E plus E-D. And then we have to replace that E.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
So go ahead.
L-O-V-E plus E-D spells. I don't know how to keep this together. Spells loved.
Okay.
Loved.
Loved. Can you use that in a sentence?
June loved her pink bear.
That's a great sentence. Now, I noticed when you put the ED onto this word, you covered up the other E. That's because ED starts with
An E.
a vowel. Yes, E is a vowel. Do you remember all the vowels?
Y, O, sometimes, no.
A,
A,
E,
E, Y, A, E, Y, O, U.
A,
A,
E.
E, I, O, U, and sometimes Y.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, now let's remove the ED suffix and let's see what else you could add.
Okay.
Of these other suffixes we have,
Okay.
what one do you want to add next? So what are you taking next?
Lovely.
Okay. All right, spell out the word some.
Okay. L-O-V-E plus L-G
L-Y.
L-Y says lovely.
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 Very
Lovely.
good. Lovely. Can you use lovely in a sentence?
June has a lovely nana.
Well, thank you. I like your sentences today. Okay. All right. Please remove the ly suffix, and there's one left there. Okay. ing.
ing. Okay.
So spell out your word sum.
LOVE
Plus
plus ing equals
loving.
loving.
Now remember, this has that suffix, that ing, starts with what? I. A vowel. That means it's going to replace the E in love. So that is how we spell loving.
Loving.
Very good. And can you use loving in a sentence?
Loving. June has a loving Nana.
You have a loving Nana. I am so lucky. Okay. Now, before you mentioned a bigger word you thought you could make, combining two of these suffixes. Which one are we going to put on first?
B.
Yes, the ing.
I.
And remember, because the I is a vowel, it's going to replace that final E. Okay, what word do we have there?
And then.
Wait, before we put on the ly, what word do we have?
Loving.
Loving. Very good. All right, now you wanted to add the ly. Now what do we have?
Lovingly.
Lovingly. That's a beautiful word. And can you use it?
June has a lovingly Nana.
Or I might use it to say, June looked lovingly at her mama this morning.
June looks lovingly at her Nana today.
Very good, June. You have just looked at 5 different words
5?
that all
4?
have the same base,
That wasn't
love.
4?
Well, you looked at loves, loved, loving, lovely, and lovingly. That's 5.
Thank you for watching.
All right. You'll notice that I wasn't putting her in a position to expect to know things when I could tell there was hesitation. I just told her what the word was so she could see it. We're just starting with this. Now I think the next time I visit, I'll be able to bring another base, probably again with a final non-syllabic E, so we can just reinforce those same suffixes again and help her to be more familiar with that. And maybe a base that doesn't have need any suffixing conventions would be okay too. It worked really well though with the cards to replace that E and then to remove it. All right, here's another one. Give students a list of words in an empty matrix. So there was another time I needed to be gone from school, and I made a matrix with GRADE as the featured base. It was, I chose that because it was later in the school year. In fact, this was the spring, and it wouldn't be long before they graduated, moved up to the next grade level. These were the directions that I gave the students. Today you are looking at the word family whose root is Latin gradus. Oh, here's what I forgot to mention. I made this matrix, I printed it out, and then I whited out all the morphemes. So what I was left with was the matrix skeleton for this particular list of words. Okay, so that was part of what they got in their directions. They were to look at the list of family members, read the definitions, think about how each word relates to the meaning of the root. So here's the list of words that they were given. You can see that I had definitions of how we currently use these words. Next, they were to identify the base in each word and underline it. So working with a partner, they were to underline the part of it that they recognized would be the base. Okay. And then over to the side, they were to write out a word sum. Because if they're going to write out a word sum, they're going to be able to fill in this empty matrix, right? And I gave them a note, think carefully about where connecting vowels will go on the matrix. The next day when I was back, I drew this on the board. We're looking at the empty matrix. Here's the list of words again that they had to work with. And now I wanted to have a conversation with them. How will they go about filling in this matrix? We started by putting the featured base in. It wasn't there. The denotation is here, but not the featured base. So we put that in. I said, how do you know that's the base? Looking at this whole list of words. And of course, they spotted every word here had grade in it. So this must be the featured base. And then I said, well, let's start over here where there's a lot of cells down in the right-hand corner. I said, what's possible to put in these cells? And we thought, well, we could have 3 suffixes in both of them. It's just that the first cell would be a suffix that was used both across the top and across the bottom. Or this could be a connecting vowel, and these could be 2 suffixes, right? So a combination of connecting vowels and suffixes is possibility. Or we have compound words here, right? So I guess that would be a possibility as well. So I said, what did you do? What did you do down there? And somebody raised their hand and said, well, I put gradually over there. I said, well, tell me about it. What were you thinking? Well, the word sum is grade plus u plus al plus ly. Oh, so you would put the connecting vowel here, the al suffix and the ly suffix. Okay. Well, that works because that would be gradually. But now what are we going to put down here? Because it's going to have to be where it uses the u connecting vowel and 2 other suffixes. And then somebody suggested graduation would fit there. So the featured base, grade, connecting vowel u, ate, ion. And boom, we had that bottom filled out, which felt great. Okay, awesome. Where are we going next? We moved up here and students said, well, gradient will fit there because we have an I connecting vowel here and an ENT suffix. I said, well, isn't that interesting? We have 2 different connecting vowels in this family. Is that possible? What language are we talking about? Well, we're talking Latin. So yes, an I connecting vowel and U connecting vowel were used with Latin bases. All right. So what goes up here? And up here we filled in the ing, the ed, and the er. So we could represent grading, graded, and grader. Then we moved over to the left-hand side. And I said, what's going on with this bottom where there's 2 cells? And it was suggested that this inner one could be a connecting vowel, and the outer one could be CENT, TARD, and PLANT, because all 3 of those would use an I connecting vowel. Okay. And then we came to these 2. What are we going to put there? At that point, what was left was upgrade, downgrade, degrade, and retrograde. The students were like, well, somebody goes, I put retro in that single one. Somebody else, oh, I put down there. I said, well, looks like you have 4 left. Looks like 3 of them could go in this larger compartment, this larger cell, and 1 of them here. But why would one be separated out from the other ones? These must have something in common, and this one must not. And that's when this hand just shot up. And the student said, degrade has to go in that single spot because it's a prefix. The DE is a prefix. All the other words create compound words. So those are free bases, and they need to be together up here. So that is exactly what happened. And you can see that we were checking off the words as we filled in. It was wonderful to hear what their understanding was, as we went around and filled these in. They were giving me word sums and reasonings for this. If you're interested in watching that whole discussion, it's featured on my YouTube channel, and it's called Words Related to Graduation. All right, here's another idea, 5th grade students teaching 2nd grade students. Now, this doesn't have to be 5th grade teaching 2nd grade. You probably already have figured that out. It just can be somebody teaching somebody else. We had the opportunity, though, to go down to second grade. They had never heard of a matrix. The second graders didn't know about word sums. This was that perfect opportunity for me to find out, what do my students understand, right? You know that the best way to know if you know something is to teach it to somebody else. Well, here was our opportunity. I went down and spoke to the second grade teachers, and I said, what's a word we could use as a base that your students are working with? And they were studying the solar system. So she said, how about star? I said, great. Came back to my fifth graders and I said, let's brainstorm some words that we could create with STAR as our base. So you can see we came up with some possibilities for compound words. We had suffixes. This was really a great base to work with. And then I asked my students, okay, you're going to be the teacher. What do you think is really important to say? So pair up with somebody and talk about that. Make a list of what you would say to somebody if you were showing them how to write a word sum and what's important to know about a matrix. And once they had thought about that, had that opportunity, then I think it was the next day, I paired them up again and I let them run through what they would say. So they had a chance to practice. Then we went down to the second grade classroom and paired up one fifth grader to one second grader. And here's a little bit of how that went.
These are all words by themselves. The words that aren't bold, they're what we call suffixes. We can add them on the end of words, and we can have like stars, days, ers, or it's a really long word.
Pick another word. How about sea star? So this is a compound word, remember. So that means you can have the word sea and you can have the word star, like on their own. So can you write a word sum for that one? Can you say it out loud? S-T-A-R. It's
And put the arrow. Yeah. Rewritten as S-T-A-R-Y. Oops. Did you get the R?
Okay, good job.
So one word, you can put it like yeah. So that's sorry. That there's one consonant at the end, and there's one vowel before the consonant, which is at the end. Like I said before, Y, I-N-G, and E-G each start with a vowel. So you would have to add that R to starring or starry or starred.
Stardust. Have you done that S-T-A-R+D-U-S-T is also written as S-T-A-R-D-U-S-T. Okay, now can you write a plus sign now?
Nice job.
Okay, I think you get the idea. What I loved when I was, watching all of the students do their teaching is how they were prepared. I definitely got the feeling that my students understood the matrix and understood word sums and could successfully teach these to somebody else. This particular student, as the teacher, had written up here, the dark words will form compound words. And this word is a base, and then wrote out a word sum and labeled each base, suffix, suffix. So I was pretty excited about that. All right, and the last idea I have is to place matrices in unexpected places as a thing of beauty and intrigue. So here, this one, mishap, I put, or unhappy, there we go. I put this at the bottom of my driveway when the pandemic started. It's like people were out walking, by themselves, of course, but they were out walking and I thought maybe somebody would pause for a minute and give it a look. The one down at the bottom here, I put on the sidewalk that connects our post office to our bank in town. That's my sense of humor, bankrupt. And then we also have a bike path. And I thought the PORT base there would be perfect, having a denotation of carry. So people might stop and give it a look. You never know. Here's another example. Those other ones could also be put on a playground, right? But these could be put around the building as well. Here's one for BAKE, right? Baked, baking, bakes, bakery, baker. Yeah, I think you put something like this in an unexpected place, and the students are going to be looking at it and wanting to know more about it. And these are very familiar words, aren't they? Now, my fifth graders might have taken a word like and gone a little bit further than a younger student might, but that's all right. That shows that it's age appropriate for them to go a little further, right? You never know. I like kids to go as far as they want to. So yeah, made a great matrix here, has the list of word sums, so a little bit more information about the word. And here's two more examples. Nail, there's a very common word that lots of students know about. Here's some word sums, and here's a little matrix. And over here, fruit, there's a matrix down there. Now, somebody in another grade might have fun seeing if they can figure out how are these all used in words where the base is fruit. So very cool. All right. Well, thank you very much for joining me. For further information, I do have a blog, Mrs. Stevens Classroom blog, it's called. I have a YouTube channel where I have some other videos. And I'm part of the Structured Word Inquiry in the Classroom Facebook group. If you are interested in joining that one, there's just more things like this, that opportunities to learn more, and lots of great discussions are going on in those groups. There are some other groups as well. If you contact me in any way through these things, I will definitely share other resources with you. There's many people to learn from. So thank you very much for joining me.